I wish I could show you. I wish I could show you how comically crooked this sad tripod is. Oh my god. Every time I invest in a new one, it gets worse. Not the point. Hello, I'm Rachel. Welcome to my book club. Vampires are my special interest book club. We are not talking about vampires now because I have a pet project midweek where I talk about gothic literature because it does pertain to vampires in a roundabout way. Would we have the gothic literature that we have without, or no, would we have the vampire literature without the gothic? Maybe, probably not. So why not talk about it and understand it better so we can better understand the things that we're reading and analyzing and things like that. Mostly it's just my excuse to be a nerd in the middle of the week when I can. So if you're here, thank you for being a nerd with me. That's great. We are in the middle of Castle of Otranto. Hold on, let me switch. Yeah. Live over there. Okay. We're in part 3 out of 5, so we've gotten not quite halfway, it says 44%. Trying to think if I have anything else I wanted to say before I started. Not really. I don't do this very consistently. Again, it comes down to when I want to, and I am currently in the mood to be dramatic and gothic and just like broody and dark and kind of annoying with this thing as a fidget toy, so maybe I won't use it. I don't have, last time I was crocheting, but I don't have any. Whatever. Hi, let's read chapter 3. It shouldn't take too long, so it depends on how I'm feeling. I might do 2 chapters tonight. I've been doing 1. We'll see. Okay. Chapter 3. Manfred's heart misgave him when he beheld the plumage on the miraculous cask shaken in concert with the sounding of the brazen trumpet. "Father," said he to Jerome, whom he now ceased to treat as Count of Falconara, "what mean these portents? If I have offended," the plumes were shaken with greater violence than before. Unhappy prince that I am," cried Manfred. "Holy Father, will you not assist me with your prayers?" "My lord," replied Jerome, "heaven is no doubt displeased with your mockery of its servants. Submit yourself to the church and cease to persecute her ministers. Dismiss this innocent youth and learn to respect the holy character I wear. Heaven will not be trifled with, you see." The trumpet sounded again. "I acknowledge I have been too hasty," said Manfred. "Father, do you go to the wicket and demand who is at the gate?" "Do you grant me the life of Theodore?" replied the friar. "I do," said Manfred, "but inquire who is without." Jerome, falling on the neck of his son, discharged a flood of tears that spoke the fullness of his soul. "You promised to go to the gate," said Manfred. "I thought," replied the friar, "your highness would excuse my thanking you first in this tribute of my heart." "Go, dearest sir," said Theodore. "Obey the prince. I do not deserve that you should delay his satisfaction for me." Jerome, inquiring who was without, was answered, "At herald." "From whom?" said he. "From the knight of the gigantic saber," said the herald, "and I must speak with the usurper of Otranto." Jerome returned to the prince, and did not fail to repeat the message in the very words it had been uttered. The first sound struck Manfred with terror, but when he heard himself styled usurper, his rage rekindled and all his courage revived. "Usurper, insolent villain," cried he, "who dares to question my title? Retire, father, this is no business for monks. I will meet this presumptuous man myself. Go to your convent and prepare the princess's return. Your son shall be a hostage for your fidelity. Your life depends on your obedience." "Good heaven, my lord," cried Jerome. "Your highness did but this instant freely pardon my child. Have you so soon forgot the interposition of heaven?" Interposition. I hope I said that right. "Heaven," replied Manfred, "does not send heralds to question the title of a lawful prince. I doubt whether it even notifies its will through friars, but that is your affair, not mine. At present, you know my pleasure, and it is not a saucy herald that shall save your son if you do not return with the princess." It was in vain for the holy man to reply. Manfred commanded him to be conducted to the postern gate and shut out from the castle, and he ordered some of his attendants to carry Theodore to the top of the Black Tower and guard him strictly, scarce permitting the father and son to exchange a hasty embrace at parting. He then withdrew to the hall, and seating himself in princely state, ordered the herald to be admitted to his presence. "Well, thou insolent," said the prince, "what wouldst thou with me?" "I come," replied he, "to thee, Manfred, usurper of the principality of Otranto, from the renowned and invincible knight, the knight of the gigantic saber." It was so amusing. The knight of the gigantic saber. What a thing to be a knight of. In the name of his lord, Frederick, Marquis of Vicenza, he demands the Lady Isabella, daughter of that prince, whom thou hast basely and traitorously got into thy power by bribing her false guardians during his absence, and he requires thee to resign the principality of Otranto, which thou hast usurped from the said Lord Frederick, the nearest of blood to the last rightful lord, Alfonso the Good. If thou dost not instantly comply with these just demands, he defies thee to single combat to the last extremity. And so saying, the herald cast down his warder. "And where is this braggart who sends thee?" said Manfred. "At the distance of a league," said the herald. "He comes to make good his lord's claim against thee, as he is a true knight, and thou an usurper and ravisher." Injurious as this challenge was, Manfred reflected that it was not his interest to provoke the Marquis. He knew how well founded the claim of Frederick was, nor was this the first time he had heard of it. Frederick's ancestors had assumed the style of princes of Otranto from the death of Alfonso the Good without issue. But Manfred, his father and grandfather, had been too powerful for the house of Vicenza to dispossess them. Frederick, a martial and amorous young prince, had married a beautiful young lady, of whom he was enamored, and who had died in childbed of Isabella. Her death affected him so much that he had taken the cross and gone to the Holy Land, where he was wounded in an engagement against the infidels, made prisoner, and reported to be dead. When the news reached Manfred's ears, he bribed the guardians of the Lady Isabella to deliver her up to him as a bride for his son Conrad, by which alliance he had proposed to unite the claims of the two houses. This motive, on Conrad's death, had cooperated to make him so suddenly resolve of espousing her himself, and the same reflection determined him now to endeavor at obtaining the consent of Frederick to this marriage. A like policy inspired him with the thought of inviting Frederick's champion into the castle, lest he should be informed of Isabella's flight, which he strictly enjoined his domestics not to disclose to any of the knight's retinue. Pause to drink some water. "Herald," said Manfred, as soon as he had digested these reflections, "return to thy master and tell him, ere we liquidate our differences by the sword, Manfred would hold some converse with him. Bid him welcome to my castle, where by my faith, as I am a true knight, he shall have courteous reception and full security for himself and followers. If we cannot adjust our quarrel by amicable means, I swear he shall depart in safety and shall have full satisfaction according to the laws of arms. So help me God and his holy Trinity. The herald made 3 obeisances and retired. Obeisances. Fancy word. What does that mean? I know the word, but I could not tell you what it means. Deferential respect. A gesture expressing deferential respect, such as a bow or curtsy. All right. So he, bowed 3 times and left. During this interview, Jerome's mind was agitated by 1,000 contrary passions. He trembled for the life of his son, and his first thought was to persuade Isabella to return to the castle, that he was scarce less alarmed at the thought of her union with Manfred. He dreaded Hippolyta's, I think that's how you say it. I remember looking it up, and it was like, Hippolyta is wrong, but Hippolyta, I think, is closer. I'm sorry. He dreaded Hippolyta's unbounded submission to the will of her lord, and though he did not doubt but he could alarm her piety not to consent to a divorce if he could get access to her. Yet should Manfred discover that the obstruction came from him, it might be equally fatal to Theodore. He was impatient to know whence came the herald who, with so little management, had questioned the title of Manfred. Yet he did not dare absent himself from the convent, lest Isabella should leave it, and her flight be imputed to him. He returned disconsolately to the monastery, uncertain on what conduct to resolve. A monk, who met him in the porch and observed his melancholy air, said, "Alas, brother, is it then true that we have lost our excellent Princess Hippolyta?" The holy man started and cried, "What meanest thou, brother? I come this instant from the castle and left her in perfect health." "Martelli," replied the other friar, "passed by the convent but a quarter of an hour ago on his way from the castle and reported that her highness was dead. All our brethren are gone to the chapel to pray for her happy transit to a better life, and willed me to wait thy arrival. They know thy holy attachment to that good lady, and are anxious for the affliction it will cause in thee. Indeed, we have all reason to weep. She was a mother to our house. But this life is but a pilgrimage. We must not murmur. We shall all follow her. May our end be like hers." "Good brother, thou dreamest," said Jerome. "I tell thee, I come from the castle, and left the princess well. Where is the lady Isabella?" "Poor gentlewoman," replied the friar. "I told her the sad news, and offered her spiritual comfort. I reminded her of the transitory condition of mortality, and advised her to take the veil. I quoted the example of the holy princess Sanchia of Aragon." "Thy zeal was laudable," said Jerome impatiently, "but at present it was unnecessary. Hippolyta is well. At least, I trust in the Lord she is. I heard nothing to the contrary. Yet, methinks, the prince's earnestness— Well, brother, but where is the lady Isabella?" "I know not," said the friar. "She wept much, and said she would retire to her chamber." Jerome left his comrade abruptly and hastened to the princess, but she was not in her chamber. He inquired of the domestics of the convent, but could learn no news of her. He searched in vain throughout the monastery and the church, and dispatched messengers. Sorry. Pause to wonder if dispatched with an E is the same as dispatched with an I? What? I think it's just a different way of spelling it, or an accidental misspelling. Okay. And dispatched messengers round the neighborhood to get intelligence if she had been seen, but to no purpose. Nothing could equal the good man's perplexity. He judged that Isabella, suspecting Manfred of having participated his wife's death, had taken the alarm and withdrawn herself to some more secret place of concealment. This new flight would probably carry the prince's fury to the heights. The report of Hippolyta's death, though it seemed almost incredible, increased his concern. I'm good with words. And though Isabella's escape bespoke her aversion of Manfred for a husband, Jerome could feel no comfort from it, while it endangered the life of his son. He determined to return to the castle and made several of his brethren accompany him to attest his innocence to Manfred, and, if necessary, join their intercession with his for Theodore. Pause to drink. And of course, I should have refilled this before I started. The prince, in the meantime, had passed into the court and ordered the gates of the castle to be flung open for the reception of the stranger knight and his train. In a few minutes, the cavalcade arrived. First came 2 harbingers with wands, next a herald, followed by 2 pages and 2 trumpets, then 100 foot guards. These were attended by as many horse. After them 50 footmen, clothed in scarlet and black, the colors of the knight. Then a led horse, 2 heralds on each side of a gentleman on horseback, bearing a banner with the arms of Vicenza and Otranto quarterly, a circumstance that much offended Manfred. But he stifled his resentment. 2 more pages. The knight's confessor telling his beads. 50 more footmen clad as before, 2 knights habited in complete armor, their beavers down, comrades to the principal knight, the squires of the 2 knights carrying their shields and devices, the knight's own squire, 100 gentlemen bearing an enormous sword and seeming to faint under the weight of it. The knight himself on a chestnut steed in complete armor, his lance and the rest, his face entirely concealed by his visor, which was surmounted by a large plume of scarlet and black feathers. 50-foot guards with drums and trumpets closed the procession, which wheeled off to the right and left to make room for the principal knight. That is an assload of people. Holy shit. As soon as he approached the gate, he stopped, and the herald, advancing, read again the words of the challenge. Manfred's eyes were fixed on the gigantic sword, and he scarce seemed to attend to the cartel, but his attention was soon diverted by a tempest of wind that rose behind him. He turned and beheld the plumes of the enchanted helmet agitated in the same extraordinary manner as before. It required intrepidity like Manfred's not to sink under a concurrence of circumstances that seemed to announce his fate. Yet, scorning in the presence of strangers to betray the courage he had always manifested, he said boldly, "Sir knight, whoever thou art, I bid thee welcome. If thou art of mortal mould, thy valor shall meet its equal. And if thou art a true knight, thou wilt scorn to employ sorcery to carry thy point. Be these omens from heaven or hell, Manfred trusts to the righteousness of his cause and to the aid of Saint Nicholas, who has ever protected his house. Alight, Sir Knight, and repose thyself. Tomorrow thou shalt have a fair field, and heaven befriend the juster side." The knight made no reply, but, dismounting, was conducted by Manfred to the great hall of the castle. As they traversed the court, the knight stopped to gaze on the miraculous casque, and kneeling down, seemed to pray inwardly for some minutes. Rising, he made a sign to the prince to lead on. As soon as they entered the hall, Manfred proposed to the stranger to disarm, but the knight shook his head in token of refusal. "Sir knight," said Manfred, "this is not courteous, but by my good faith I will not cross thee, nor shalt thou have cause to complain of the Prince of Otranto. No treachery is designed on my part. I hope none is intended on thine. Here, take my gage," giving him his ring. "Your friends and you shall employ the laws of hospitality. Rest here until refreshments are brought. I will but give orders for the accommodation of your train and return to you." The 3 knights bowed as accepting his courtesy. Manfred directed the stranger's retinue to be conducted to an adjacent hospital, founded by the Princess Hippolyta for the reception of pilgrims. As they made the circuit of the court to return towards the gate, the gigantic sword burst from the supporters and, falling to the ground opposite to the helmet, remained immovable. Manfred, almost hardened to preternatural appearances, surmounted the shock of this new prodigy, and returning to the hall, where by this time the feast was ready, he invited his silent guests to take their places. Manfred, however, ill his heart was at ease, endeavored to inspire the company with mirth. He put several questions to them, but was answered only by signs. They raised their visors, but sufficiently to feed themselves, and that sparingly. Sirs, said the prince, ye are the first guests I ever treated within these walls who scorned to hold any intercourse with me, nor has it oft been customary, I ween, for princes to hazard their state and dignity against strangers and mutes. You say you come in the name of Frederick of Vicenza. I have ever heard that he was a gallant and courteous knight, nor would he, I am bold to say, think it beneath him to mix in social converse with a prince that is his equal, and not unknown by deeds and arms. Still ye are silent. Well, be it as it may, by the laws of hospitality and chivalry ye are masters under this roof. Ye shall do your pleasure. But come, give me a goblet of wine. Ye will not refuse to pledge me to the healths of your fair mistresses. The principal knight sighed and crossed himself and was rising from the board. Sir knight, said Manfred, what I said was but in sport. I shall constrain you in nothing. Use your good liking. Since mirth is not your mood, let us be sad. Business may hit your fancies better. Let us withdraw, and hear if what I have to unfold may be better relished than the vain efforts I have made for your pastime. Manfred, then conducting the three knights into an inner chamber, shut the door, and inviting them to be seated, began thus, addressing himself to the chief personage. You come, Sir Knight, as I understand, in the name of the Marquis of Vicenza, to redemand the Lady Isabella, his daughter, who has been contracted in the face of Holy Church to my son, by the consent of her legal guardians, and to require me to resign my dominions to your lord, who gives himself for the nearest of blood to Prince Alfonso, whose soul God rest. I shall speak to the latter article of your demands first. You must know, our lord knows, that I enjoy the principality of Otranto from my father, Don Manuel, as he received it from his father, Don Ricardo. Alfonso, their predecessor, dying childless in the Holy Land, bequeathed his estates to my grandfather, Don Ricardo, in consideration of his faithful services. The stranger shook his head. Sir Knight, said Manfred, warmly, Ricardo was a valiant and upright man. He was a pious man, witness his munificent foundation of the adjoining church and 2 convents. He was peculiarly patronized by Saint Nicholas. My grandfather was incapable, I say, sir. Don Ricardo was incapable. Excuse me. Your interruption has disordered me. I venerate the memory of my grandfather. Well, sirs, he held this estate. He held it by his good sword and by the favor of St. Nicholas. So did my father. And so, sirs, will I, come what come will. But Frederick, your lord, is nearest in blood. I have consented to put my title to the issue of the sword. Does that imply a vicious title? I might have asked, where is Frederick, your lord? Report speaks him dead in captivity. You say, your actions say, he lives. I question it not. I might, sirs, I might, but I do not. Other princes would bid Frederick take his inheritance by force if he can. They would not stake their dignity on a single combat. They would not submit it to the decision of unknown mutes. Pardon me, gentlemen, I am too warm. But suppose yourselves in my situation. As ye are stout knights, would it not move your choler to have your own and the honor of your ancestors called in question? but to the point. Ye require me to deliver up the Lady Isabella. Sirs, I must ask if ye are authorized to receive her. The knight nodded. Receive her, continued Manfred. Well, you are authorized to receive her, but, gentle knight, may I ask if you have full powers? The knight nodded. Paused to drink. This book is mostly long exchanges of dialogue. I can see why people don't really talk about it anymore. Okay. "'Tis well," said Manfred. "Then hear what I have to offer. You see, gentlemen, before you, the most unhappy of men." He began to weep. "Afford me your compassion. I am entitled to it. Indeed I am. No, I have lost my only hope, my joy, the support of my house. Conrad died yester morning." The knights discovered signs of surprise. "Yes, sirs, fate has disposed of my son. Isabella is at liberty." "Do you then restore her?" cried the chief knight, breaking silence. "Afford me your patience," said Manfred. "I rejoice to find, by this testimony of your goodwill, that this matter may be adjusted without blood. It is no interest of mine dictates what little I have farther to say. Ye behold in me a man disgusted with the world. The loss of my son has weaned me from earthly cares. Power and greatness have no longer any charms in my eyes. I wished to transmit the scepter I had received from my ancestors with honor to my son, but that is over. Life itself is so indifferent to me that I accepted your defiance with joy. A good knight cannot go to the grave with more satisfaction than when falling in his vocation. Whatever is the will of heaven, I submit. For alas, sirs, I am a man of many sorrows. Manfred is no object of envy, but no doubt you are acquainted with my story." The knight made signs of ignorance and seemed curious to have Manfred proceed. "It is possible, sirs," continued the prince, "that my story should be a secret to you? Have you heard nothing relating to me and the Princess Hippolyta?" They shook their heads. "No." "Thus, then, sirs, it is. You think me ambitious. Ambition, alas, is composed of more rugged materials. If I were ambitious, I should not for so many years have been a prey to all the hell of conscientious scruples. But I weary your patience. I will be brief. Know, then, that I have long been troubled in mind of my union with the Princess Hippolyta. Oh, sirs, if ye were acquainted with that excellent woman, if ye knew that I adore her like a mistress and cherish her as a friend. But man was not born for perfect happiness. She shares my scruples, and with her consent I have brought this matter before the church, for we are related within the forbidden degrees. I expect every hour the definitive sentence that must separate us forever. I am sure you feel for me. I see you do. Pardon these tears." The knights gazed on each other, wondering where this would end. Manfred continued. "Same, yeah. The death of my son betiding while my soul was under this anxiety. I thought of nothing but resigning my dominions and retiring forever from the sight of mankind. My only difficulty was to fix on a successor who would be tender of my people, and to dispose of the Lady Isabella, who is dear to me as my own blood. I was willing to restore the line of Alfonso, even in his most distant kindred. And though, pardon me, I am satisfied it was his will that Ricardo's lineage should take place of his own relations, yet where was I to search for those relations? I knew of none but Frederick, your lord. He was a captive to the infidels or dead, and were he living and at home, would he quit the flourishing state of Vicenza for the inconsiderable principality of Otranto? Oh my god, I don't even know if I can do that sentence again, it's so long. I knew of none but Frederick, your lord. He was a captive to the infidels, or dead, and were he living and at home, would he quit the flourishing state of Vicenza for the inconsiderable principality of Otranto. If he would not, could I bear the thought of seeing a hard, unfeeling viceroy set over my poor faithful people? For, sirs, I love my people, and thank heaven am beloved by them. But ye will ask, whither tends this long discourse? Briefly, then, thus, sirs, heaven in your arrival seems to point out a remedy for these difficulties and my misfortunes. The Lady Isabella is at liberty. I shall soon be so. I would submit to anything for the good of my people, were it not the best, the only way to extinguish the feuds between our families. If I was to take the Lady Isabella to wife, you start. But though Hippolyta's virtues will ever be dear to me, a prince must not consider himself. He is born for his people. A servant at that instant entering the chamber apprised Manfred that Jerome and several of his brethren demanded immediate access to him. The prince, provoked at this interruption, and fearing that the friar would discover to the strangers that Isabella had taken sanctuary, was going to forbid Jerome's entrance, but recollecting that he was certainly arrived to notify the princess's return, Manfred began to excuse himself to the knights for leaving them for a few moments, but was prevented by the arrival of the friars. Manfred angrily reprimanded them for their intrusion, and would have forced them back from the chamber, but Jerome was too much agitated to be repulsed. He declared aloud the flight of Isabella, with protestations of his own innocence. Manfred, distracted at the news, and not less at its coming to the knowledge of the strangers, uttered nothing but incoherent sentences, now upbraiding the friar, now apologizing to the knights, earnest to know what has become of Isabella, yet equally afraid of their knowing, impatient to pursue her, yet dreading to have them join in the pursuit. He offered to despatch messengers in quest of her, but the chief knight, no longer keeping silence, reproached Manfred in bitter terms for his dark and ambitious dealing, and demanded the cause of Isabella's first absence from the castle. Manfred, casting a stern look at Jerome, implying a command of silence, pretended that on Conrad's death he had placed her in sanctuary until he could determine how to dispose of her. Jerome, who trembled for his son's life, did not dare contradict this falsehood, but one of his brethren, not under the same anxiety, declared frankly that she had fled to their church in the preceding night. The prince in vain endeavored to stop this discovery, which overwhelmed him with shame and confusion. The principal stranger, amazed at the contradictions he heard, and more than half persuaded that Manfred had secreted the princess, notwithstanding the concern he expressed at her flight, rushing to the door, said, "Thou traitor prince, Isabella shall be found." Manfred endeavored to hold him, but the other knights assisting their comrade, he broke from the prince and hastened into the court, demanding his attendance. Manfred, finding it vain to divert him from the pursuit, offered to accompany him, and summoning his attendants, and taking Jerome and some of the friars to guide them, they issued from the castle. Manfred, privately giving orders to have the knight's company secured, while to the night he affected to dispatch a messenger to require their assistance. Lots of plot, lots of things happening. Pause to drink. Actually, pause to get a refill, because, man, I should have refilled this. Hold on. You don't need to listen to me doing things. Just look at my lovely background in silence. Okay. I got a squishy toy that's hopefully quiet. The company had no sooner quitted the castle than Matilda, who felt herself deeply interested for the young peasant, since she had seen him condemned to death in the hall, and whose thoughts had been taken up with concerting measures to save him, was informed by some of the female attendants that Manfred had dispatched all his men various ways in pursuit of Isabella. He had not in his hurry given this order in general terms, not meaning to extend it to the guard he had set upon Theodore, but forgetting it. The domestics, officious to obey so peremptory a prince. Wow, okay, 2 words I don't know where. And one, assertive of authority in an annoyingly domineering way, especially with regard to petty or trivial matters. Intrusively enthusiastic in offering help or advice, interfering. Okay. The domestics, assertive of authority in an annoyingly domineering way, especially with regard to petty or trivial matters, to obey so peremptory, insisting on immediate attention or obedience, especially in a brusquely imperious way, to open, to appeal or challenge final, a prince. Okay. Anxious to obey, so demanding of a prince, and urged by their own curiosity and love of novelty to join in any precipitate chase, had to a man left the castle. Matilda disengaged herself from her woman, stole up to the black tower, and unbolting the door, presented herself to the astonished Theodore. "Young man," said she, "though filial duty and womanly modesty condemn the step I am taking, yet holy charity, surmounting all other ties, justifies this act. Fly. The doors of thy prison are open. My father and his domestics are absent, but they may soon return. Be gone in safety, and may the angels of heaven direct thy course." Thou art surely one of those angels," said the enraptured Theodore. "None but a blessed saint could speak, could act, could look like thee. May I not know the name of my divine protectress? Methought thou namest thy father. Is it possible? Can Manfred's blood feel holy pity? Lovely lady, thou answerest not. But how art thou here thyself? Why dost thou neglect thy own safety and waste a thought on a wretch like Theodore? Let us fly together. The life thou bestowest, the life thou bestowest shall be dedicated to thy defense." "Alas, thou mistakest," said Matilda, sighing. "I am Manfred's daughter, but no dangers await me." "Amazement," said Theodore. "But last night I blessed myself for yielding the service thy gracious compassion so charitably returns me now." "Still, thou art in an error," said the princess, "but this is no time for explanation. Fly, virtuous youth, that I will accept the life at the hazard of aught calamitous to thee. Better I endured 1,000 deaths." "I run no risk," said Matilda, but by thy delay, depart. It cannot be known that I have assisted thy flight." It's making noises. "Swear by the saints above," said Theodore, "that thou canst not be suspected, else here I vow to await whatever can befall me." "Oh, thou art too generous," said Matilda, "but rest assured that no suspicion can alight on me." Just gonna cut in with some commentary. She's telling you to leave, and you're just standing there talking at her. Dude, fly. Get out of there. What are you doing? Oh my god. "Give me thy beauteous hand in token that thou dost not deceive me," said Theodore, "and let me bathe it with the warm tears of gratitude. Forbear, said the princess. This must not be. Alas, said Theodore, I have never known but calamity until this hour. Perhaps shall never know other fortune again. Suffer the chaste raptures of holy gratitude. 'Tis my soul would print its effusions on thy hand. Forbear and be gone, said Matilda. How would Isabella approve of seeing thee at my feet? Who is Isabella? Said the young man with surprise. Ah, me, I fear, said the princess. I am serving a deceitful one. Hast thou forgot thy curiosity this morning? Thy looks, thy actions, all thy beauteous self seem an emanation of divinity, said Theodore. But thy words are dark and mysterious. Speak, lady, speak to thy servant's comprehension. Thou understandest but too well, said Matilda. But once more I command thee to be gone. Thy blood, which I may preserve, will be on my hands if I waste the time in vain discourse. I go, lady, said Theodore, because it is thy will, and because I would not bring the gray hairs of my father with sorrow to the grave. Say, but, adored lady, that I have thy gentle pity. Stay, said Matilda. I will conduct thee to the subterraneous vault by which Isabella escaped. It will lead thee to the church of St. Nicholas, where thou mayest take sanctuary. What? Said Theodore. Was it another, and not thy lovely self, that I assisted to find the subterraneous passage? It was, said Matilda, but ask no more. I tremble to see thee still abide here. Fly to the sanctuary. To sanctuary, said Theodore. No, princess. Sanctuaries are for helpless damsels or for criminals. Theodore's soul is free from guilt, nor will wear the appearance of it. Give me a sword, lady, and thy father shall learn that Theodore scorns an ignominious fight. Ignominious flight. What is ignominious? We are learning words tonight. Deserving or causing public disgrace or shame. Okay. And thy father shall learn that Theodore scorns an ignominious fight. Probably saying that wrong. Ignominious, too many ends. Rash youth, said Matilda, thou wouldst not dare to lift thy presumptuous arm against the Prince of Otranto? Not against thy father, indeed, I dare not, said Theodore. Excuse me, lady. I had forgotten, but could I gaze on thee and remember thou art sprung from the tyrant Manfred? But he is thy father, and from this moment my injuries are buried in oblivion. A deep and hollow... Can you hear that? Sounds like a cop. Okay, I don't think it's getting closer. Okay. A deep and hollow groan, which seemed to come from above, startled the princess and Theodore. Good heaven! We are overheard, said the princess. They listened, but perceiving no further noise, they both concluded it the effect of pent-up vapors, and the princess, preceding Theodore softly, carried him to her father's armory, where, equipping him with a complete suit, he was conducted by Matilda to the postern gate. Avoid the town, said the princess, and all the western side of the castle. 'Tis there the search must be making by Manfred and the strangers. But he thee to the opposite quarter. Yonder behind that forest to the east is a chain of rocks, hollowed into a labyrinth of caverns that reach to the sea coast. There thou mayst lie concealed, till thou canst make signs to some vessel to put on shore and take thee off. Go! Heaven be thy guide, and sometimes in thy prayers remember Matilda. Pause to drink. I'm gonna put my sweatshirt on. Oh, ow, it smacks me. Okay. Theodore flung himself at her feet. This is upside down. Okay. I'm gonna find my way, eventually. Theodore flung himself at her feet and, seizing her lily hand, which, with struggles, she suffered him to kiss, he vowed to the earliest opportunity to get himself knighted, and fervently entreated her permission to swear himself eternally her knight. Oh, that's sweet. Ere the princess could reply, a clap of thunder was suddenly heard that shook the battlements. Theodore, regardless of the tempest, would have urged his suit, but the princess, dismayed, retreated hastily into the castle and commanded the youth to be gone with an air that would not be disobeyed. He sighed and retired, but with eyes fixed on the gate, until Matilda, closing it, put an end to an interview in which the hearts of both had drunk so deeply of a passion, which both now tasted for the first time. Theodore went pensively to the convent to acquaint his father with his deliverance. Deliveries. There he learned the absence of Jerome and the pursuit that was making after the Lady Isabella, with some particulars of whose story he now first became acquainted. The generous gallantry of his nature prompted him to wish to assist her, but the monks could lend him no lights to guess at the route she had taken. He was not tempted to wander far in search of her, for the idea of Matilda had imprinted itself so strongly on his heart that he could not bear to absent himself at much distance from her abode. The tenderness Jerome had expressed for him concurred to confirm this reluctance, and he even persuaded himself that filial affection was the chief cause of his hovering between the castle and monastery. Until Jerome should return at night, Theodore at length determined to repair to the forest that Matilda had pointed out to him. Arriving there, he sought the gloomiest shades, as best suited to the pleasing melancholy that reigned in his mind. In his mood, he roved insensibly to the caves which had formerly served as a retreat to hermits, and were now reported round the country to be haunted by evil spirits. Sorry, Can somebody give me some directions to where these caves that are retreat for hermits that are also rumored to be haunted? I mean, you give me some blankets, I could probably make it work. He recollected to have heard this tradition, and being of a brave and adventurous disposition, he willingly indulged his curiosity in exploring the secret recesses of this labyrinth. He had not penetrated far before he thought he heard the steps of some person who seemed to retreat before him. Theodore, though firmly grounded in all our holy faith enjoins to be believed, had no apprehension that good men were abandoned without cause to the malice of the powers of darkness. He thought the place more likely to be infested by robbers than by those infernal agents who are reported to molest and bewilder travelers. He had long burned with impatience to approve his valor. Drawing his saber, he marched sedately onwards, still directing his steps as the imperfect rustling sound before him led the way. The armor he wore was a like indication to the person who avoided him. Theodore, now convinced that he was not mistaken, redoubled his pace, and evidently gained on the person that fled, whose haste increasing, Theodore came up just as the woman fell breathless before him. He hasted to raise her, but her terror was so great that he apprehended she would faint in his arms. He used every gentle word to dispel her alarms, and assured her that, far from injuring, he would defend her at the peril of his life. The lady, recovering her spirits from his courteous demeanor, and gazing on her protector, said, "Sure, I have heard that voice before." "Not to my knowledge," replied Theodore, "unless, as I conjecture, thou art the Lady Isabella." "Merciful heaven!" cried she, "thou art not sent in quest of me, art thou?" And saying those words, she threw herself at his feet, and besought him not to deliver her up to Manfred. "To Manfred?" cried Theodore. "No, lady, I have once already delivered thee from his tyranny, and it shall fare hard with me now, but I will place thee out of the reach of his daring." Is it possible, said she, that thou shouldst be the generous unknown whom I met last night in the vault of the castle? Sure thou art not a mortal, but my guardian angel? On my knees let me thank. Hold, gentle princess, said Theodore, nor demean thyself before a poor and friendless young man. If heaven has selected me for thy deliverer, it will accomplish its work and strengthen my arm in thy cause. But come, lady, we are too near the mouth of the cavern. Let us seek its inmost recesses. I can have no tranquillity till I have placed thee beyond the reach of danger. Alas, what mean you, sir? Said she. Though all your actions are noble, though your sentiments speak the purity of your soul, is it fitting that I should accompany you alone into these perplexed retreats? Should we be found together, what would a censorious world think of my conduct? Censorious world think of my conduct. I need more water. I respect your virtuous delicacy, said Theodore, nor do you harbor a suspicion that wounds my honor. I meant to conduct you into the most private cavity of these rocks, and then, at the hazard of my life, to guard their entrance against every living thing. Besides, lady, continued he, drawing a deep sigh, beauteous and all perfect as your form is, and though my wishes are not guiltless of aspiring, no, my soul is dedicated to another, and although a sudden noise prevented Theodore from proceeding, they soon distinguished these sounds. Isabella! What ho, Isabella! The trembling princess relapsed into her former agony of fear. Theodore endeavored to encourage her, but in vain. He assured her he would die rather than suffer her to return under Manfred's power, and begging her to remain concealed, he went forth to prevent the person in search of her from approaching. At the mouth of the cavern he found an armed knight, discoursing with a peasant, who assured him he had seen a lady enter the passes of the rock. The knight was preparing to seek her, when Theodore, placing himself in his way, with his sword drawn, sternly forbade him at his peril to advance. And who art thou, who darest to cross my way? Said the knight haughtily. One who does not dare more than he will perform, said Theodore. I seek the Lady Isabella, said the knight, and understand she has taken refuge among these rocks. Impede me not, or thou wilt repent having provoked my resentment. Thy purpose is as odious as thy resentment is contemptible, said Theodore. Return whence thou camest, or we shall soon know whose resentment is most terrible. The stranger, who was the principal knight that had arrived from the Marquis of Vicenza, had galloped from Manfred, as he was busied in getting information of the princess and giving various orders to prevent her falling into the power of the three knights. Their chief had suspected Manfred of being privy to the princess's absconding, and this insult from a man who he concluded was stationed by that prince to secrete her. Confirming his suspicions, he made no reply, but discharging a blow with his saber at Theodore, would soon have removed all obstruction if Theodore, who took him for one of Manfred's captains, and who had no sooner given the provocation than prepared to support it, had not received the stroke on his shield. The valor that had so long been smothered in his breast broke forth at once. He rushed impetuously on the knight, whose pride and wrath were not less powerful incentives to hardy deeds. The combat was furious, but not long. Theodore wounded the knight in 3 several places, and at last disarmed him as he fainted by the loss of blood. The peasant, who had fled from the first onset, had given the alarm to some of Manfred's domestics, who, by his orders, were dispersed through the forest in pursuit of Isabella. They came up as the night fell, whom they soon discovered to be the noble stranger. Theodore, notwithstanding his hatred to Manfred, could not behold the victory he had gained without emotions of pity and generosity. But he was more touched when he learned the quality of his adversary and was informed that he was no retainer, but an enemy of Manfred. He assisted the servants of the latter in disarming the knight and in endeavoring to staunch the blood that flowed from his wounds. The knight, recovering his speech, said in a faint and faltering voice, "Generous foe, we have both been in an error. I took thee for an instrument of the tyrant. I perceive thou hast made the like mistake. It is too late for excuses. I faint. If Isabella is at hand, call her. I have important secrets too." "He is dying," said one of the attendants. "Has nobody a crucifix about them? Andrea, do thou pray over him." "Fetch some water," said Theodore, "and pour it down his throat while I hasten to the princess." Saying this, he flew to Isabella, and in few words told her modestly that he had been so unfortunate by mistake as to wound a gentleman from her father's court, who wished, ere he died, to impart something of consequence to her. The princess, who had been transported at hearing the voice of Theodore as he called to her to come forth, was astonished at what she heard. Suffering herself to be conducted by Theodore, the new proof of whose valor recalled her dispersed spirits, she came where the bleeding knight lay speechless on the ground. But her fears returned when she beheld the domestics of Manfred. She would again have fled if Theodore had not made her observe that they were unarmed, and had not threatened them with instant death if they should dare to seize the princess. The stranger, opening his eyes and beholding a woman, said, "Art thou, pray tell me truly, art thou Isabella of Vicenza?" "I am," said she. "Good heaven restore thee. Then thou, said the knight, struggling for utterance, "seest thy father. Give me one." "Oh, amazement! Horror! What do I hear? What do I see?" cried Isabella. "My father? You my father? How came you here, sir? For heaven's sake, speak! Oh, run for help, for he will expire." "'Tis most true," said the wounded knight, exerting all his force. "I am Frederick, thy father. Yes, I came to deliver thee. It will not be. Give me a parting kiss and take—" "Sir," said Theodore, "do not exhaust yourself. Suffer us to convey you to the castle." "To the castle," said Isabella. "Is there no help nearer than the castle? Would you expose my father to the tyrant? If he goes thither, I dare not accompany him, and yet can I leave him?" "My child," said Frederick, "it matters not for me whither I am carried. A few minutes will place me beyond danger, but while I have eyes to dote on thee, forsake me not, dear Isabella. This brave knight, I know not who he is, will protect thy innocence. Sir, you will not abandon my child, will you?" Theodore, shedding tears over his victim and vowing to guard the princess at the expense of his life, persuaded Frederick to suffer himself to be conducted to the castle. They placed him on a horse belonging to one of the domestics. After binding up his wounds as well as they were able, Theodore marched by his side, and the afflicted Isabella, who could not bear to quit him, followed mournfully behind. Damn. Incredibly dramatic. We got another death, or almost death. I got it in me to do another part. I want to finish this book. I'm ready to move on to other examples of Gothic literature. Though I think a lot of them are pretty long, so it's gonna be hard to finish most of them, to be honest with you. I recently tried to read Frankenstein. Second time I've tried to read it. Second time I did not finish. I gave up. I made it maybe halfway. I just cannot stand that book. It's so boring. And for what? I'm sorry. If you like it, that's cool. Good for you. I'm happy people still like it. You know, it's a classic for a reason, and it's cool that we're still reading it. But man, I cannot stand that freaking book. I'm currently reading. Oh God, what am I currently reading? Sometimes I start sentences without having a middle. it? Oh, that's why. It's The Woman in White by Willie Collins or something. Wilkie Collins or something. The Woman in White from 1860. It's okay. If you like Victorian literature, I hear it's like a good classic. One of the first detective novels, which is fine so far. The primary speaking character is kind of a dick. By that I mean he just goes around and is like, wow, that woman's ugly, that woman's hot, that woman's insane, and it's like, sir, please stop talking about women. I don't want to hear your opinions on women. All of your opinions so far have sucked. Please shut up. I'm only like maybe 60 pages in out of close to 500, so we'll see if I can even finish it. Not the point of what we're talking about today, just needed to ramble for a little bit between parts, apparently. Another one that I keep trying to read is Crime and Punishment. I'm trying. I want to like it. In theory, I would love it. It's dramatic. It's Russian. It's got all these, like, a main character who's constantly fainting. Got life and death and the question of what is good, what makes a human good, and what makes a human worthy of living, and all of that, right? Like the thick philosophy crap, right? But it's so depressing and not a lot happens. I can maybe handle one, maybe the other, but both at once is just a lot. So I keep putting it down, forgetting about it, trying to pick it back up. I'm currently in the trying to pick it back up stage, but I don't think it's going to happen. If it was like vaguely related enough to vampires, I could get myself to rate it on stream and then have force myself to finish it. This is how I get through a lot of these books. I have this stream. I don't want to let anyone down. I don't want to let myself down. So it holds me accountable in a way. But I don't think I could get away with reading about Crime and Punishment on my channel about vampire books. I'm not even getting away with the Castle of Otranto. I look at the metrics. This currently has 0 views. It will probably never have more than 1. If it ever does. Anyway, okay. Part 4 for that one future viewer who actually watches this. The sorrowful troop no sooner arrived at the castle than they were met by Hippolyta and Matilda, whom Isabella had sent one of the domestics before to advertise of their approach. The ladies, causing Frederick to be conveyed into the nearest chamber, retired, while the surgeons examined his wounds. Matilda blushed at seeing Theodore and Isabella together, but endeavored to conceal it by embracing the latter and condoling with her on her father's mischance. The surgeons soon came to acquaint Hippolyta that none of the Marquis's wounds were dangerous, and that he was desirous of seeing his daughter and the princesses. Theodore, under pretense of expressing his joy at being freed from his apprehensions of the combat being fatal to Frederick, could not resist the impulse of following Matilda. Her eyes were so often cast down on meeting his, that Isabella, who regarded Theodore as attentively as he gazed on Matilda, soon divined who the object was that he had told her in the cave engaged his affections. While this mute scene passed, Hippolyta demanded of Frederick the cause of his having taken that mysterious course for reclaiming his daughter, and threw in various apologies to excuse her lord for the match contracted between their children. Frederick, however, incensed against Manfred, was not insensible to the courtesy and benevolence of Hippolyta, but he was still more struck with the lovely form of Matilda. Wishing to detain them by his bedside, he informed Hippolyta of his story. He told her that, while prisoner to the infidels, he had dreamed that his daughter, of whom he had learned no news since his captivity, was detained in a castle, where she was in danger of the most dreadful misfortunes, and that if he obtained his liberty and repaired to a wood near Joppa, he would learn more. Alarmed at this dream and incapable of obeying the directions given by it, his chains became more grievous than ever. But while his thoughts were occupied on the means of obtaining his liberty, he received the agreeable news that the Confederate princes who were warring in Palestine had paid his ransom. He instantly set out for the wood that had been marked in his dream. For 3 days he and his attendants had wandered in the forest without seeing a human form, but on the evening of the 3rd they came to a cell in which they found a venerable hermit in the agonies of death. Applying rich cordials, cordial, warm and friendly, strongly felt, a comforting or pleasant tasting medicine. Applying rich cordials, they brought the fainting man to his speech. "My son," said he, "I am bounden to your charity, but it is in vain. I am going to my eternal rest, yet I die with the satisfaction of performing the will of heaven. When first I repaired to this solitude, after seeing my country become a prey to unbelievers, it is, alas, above 50 years since I was witness to that dreadful scene. St. Nicholas appeared to me and revealed a secret, which he bade me never disclose to mortal man, but on my deathbed. This is that tremendous hour, and ye are no doubt the chosen warriors to whom I was ordered to reveal my trust. As soon as ye have done the last offices to this wretched corse, dig under the 7th tree on the left hand of this poor cave, and your pains will, oh, good heaven, receive my soul." With those words, the devout man breathed his last. "By break of day," continued Frederick, "when we had committed the holy relics to earth, we dug according to direction. But what was our astonishment when, about the depth of 6 feet, we discovered an enormous saber, the very weapon yonder in the court. On the blade, which was then partly out of the scabbard, though since closed by our efforts in removing it, were written the following lines. No, excuse me, madam," added the Marquis, turning to Hippolyta. "If I forbear to repeat them, I respect your sex and rank, and would not be guilty of offending your ear with sounds injurious to aught that is dear to you." Incredible. I'm me reading this book 2025, and in the book the man is scared to say the words to a woman because they're so, I don't know, haunting or something. I picked this up. Ugh. He paused. Hippolyta trembled. She did not doubt, but Frederick was destined by heaven to accomplish the fate that seemed to threaten her house. Looking with anxious fondness at Matilda, a silent tear stole down her cheek, but recollecting herself, she said, "Proceed, my lord. Heaven does nothing in vain. Mortals must receive its divine behests with lowliness and submission. It is our part to deprecate its wrath or bow to its decrees. Repeat the sentence, my lord. We listen resigned." Frederick was grieved that he had proceeded so far. The dignity and patient firmness of Hippolyta penetrated him with respect, and the tender, silent affection with which the princess and her daughter regarded each other melted him almost to tears. Yet, apprehensive that his forbearance to obey would be more alarming, he repeated in a faltering and low voice the following lines. "Wearer, a casque that suits this sword is found. With perils is thy daughter compassed round. Alfonso's blood alone can save the maid, and quiet a long restless prince's shade." "What is there in these lines," said Theodore impatiently, "that affects these princesses? Why are they to be shocked by a mysterious delicacy that has so little foundation?" "Your words are rude, young man," said the Marquis, "and though fortune has favored you once, my young lord, no, my honored lord," said Isabella, who resented Theodore's warmth, which she perceived was dictated by his sentiments for Matilda. Discompose not yourself for the glossing of a peasant's son. He forgets the reverence he owes you, but he is not accustomed. Hippolyta, concerned at the heat that had arisen, checked Theodore for his boldness, but with an air acknowledging his zeal and changing the conversation, demanded of Frederick where he had left her lord. As the Marquis was going to reply, they heard a noise without, and rising to inquire the cause, Manfred, Jerome, and part of the troop, who had met an imperfect rumor of what had happened, entered the chamber. Manfred advanced hastily towards Frederick's bed to condole with him on his misfortune and to learn the circumstances of the combat, when starting in an agony of terror and amazement, he cried, "Ha! What art thou, thou dreadful spectre? Is my hour come?" "My dearest, gracious lord," cried Hippolyta, clasping him in her arms, "what is it you see? Why do you fix your eyeballs thus?" "What?" cried Manfred, breathless. "Dost thou see nothing, Hippolyta? Is this a ghastly phantom sent to me alone, to me who did not?" "For mercy's sweetest self, my lord," said Hippolyta, "resume your soul, command your reason. There is none here but us, your friends." "What? Is it not that Alfonso?" cried Manfred. "Dost thou not see him? Can it be my brain's delirium?" "This, my lord," said Hippolyta, "this is Theodore, the youth who has been so unfortunate." "Theodore," said Manfred mournfully, and striking his forehead. "Theodore, or a phantom? He has unhinged the soul of Manfred. But how comes he here, and how comes he in armor?" "I believe he went in search of Isabella," said Hippolyta. "Of Isabella?" said Manfred, relapsing into rage. Yes, that is not doubtful. But how did he escape from durance in which I left him? Was it Isabella, or this hypocritical old friar, that procured his enlargement?" "And would a parent be criminal, my lord," said Theodore, "if he meditated the deliverance of his child?" Jerome, amazed to hear himself in a manner accused by his son, and without foundation, knew not what to think. He could not comprehend how Theodore had escaped, how he came to be armed, and to encounter Frederick. Still, he would not venture to ask any questions that might tend to inflame Manfred's wrath against his son. Jerome's silence convinced Manfred that he had contrived Theodore's release. "And is it thus, thou ungrateful old man," said the prince, addressing himself to the friar, "that thou repayest mine and Hippolyta's bounties, and not content with traversing my heart's nearest wishes, thou armest thy bastard, and bringest him into my own castle to insult me?" "My lord," said Theodore, "you wrong my father. Neither he nor I are capable of harboring a thought against your peace. Is it insolence thus to surrender myself to your highness's pleasure?" added he, laying his sword respectfully at Manfred's feet. "Behold my bosom. Strike, my lord, if you suspect that a disloyal thought is lodged there. There is not a sentiment engraven on my heart that does not venerate you and yours." The grace and fervor with which Theodore uttered these words interested every person present in his favor. Even Manfred was touched, yet still possessed with his resemblance to Alfonso. His admiration was dashed with secret horror. "Rise," said he, "thy life is not my present purpose, but tell me thy history, and how thou camest connected with this old traitor here." "My lord," said Jerome eagerly. "Peace, impostor," said Manfred. "I will not have him prompted." "My lord," said Theodore, "I want no assistance. My story is very brief. I was carried at 5 years of age to Algiers with my mother, who had been taken by corsairs from the coast of Sicily. She died of grief in less than a 12-month. The tears gushed from Jerome's eyes, on whose countenance 1,000 anxious passions stood expressed. Before she died, continued Theodore, she bound a writing about my arm under my garments, which told me I was the son of the Count Falconera. It is most true, said Jerome. I am that wretched father. Again, I enjoin thee silence, said Manfred. Proceed. I remained in slavery, said Theodore, until within these 2 years, when attending on my master and his cruises, I was delivered by a Christian vessel, which overpowered the pirate, and discovering myself to the captain, he generously put me on shore in Sicily. But alas, instead of finding a father, I learned that his estate, which was situated on the coast, had, during his absence, been laid waste by the rover who had carried my mother and me into captivity, that his castle had been burnt to the ground, and that my father on his return had sold what remained, and was retired into religion in the kingdom of Naples, but where no man could inform me. I need water, clearly. Hold on. Destitute and friendless, hopeless almost of attaining the transport of a parent's embrace, I took the first opportunity of setting sail for Naples. Naples. I don't know. There seems to be many cities that have the word Nepal and Naples in them. I've never bothered. We're just whatever. Whatever. I took the first opportunity of setting sail for Naples, from whence, within these 6 days, I wandered into this province, still supporting myself by the labor of my hands, nor until yestermorn did I believe that heaven had reserved any lot for me, but peace of mind and contented poverty. This, my lord, is Theodore's story. I am blessed beyond my hope in finding a father. I am unfortunate beyond my desert in having incurred your highness's displeasure. He ceased. A murmur of approbation gently arose from the audience. This is not all, said Frederick. I am bound in honor to add what he suppresses. Though he is modest, I must be generous. He is one of the bravest youths on Christian ground. He is warm, too, and from the short knowledge I have of him, I will pledge myself for his veracity. If what he reports of himself were not true, he would not utter it. And for me, youth, I honor a frankness which becomes thy birth. But now, and thou didst offend me, yet the noble blood which flows in thy veins may well be allowed to boil out, when it has so recently traced itself to its source. Come, my lord, turning to Manfred, if I can pardon him, surely you may. It is not the youth's fault if you took him for a spectre. This bitter taunt galled the soul of Manfred. If beings from another world, replied he haughtily, have power to impress my mind with awe, it is more than living man can do, nor could a stripling's arm. My lord, interrupted Hippolyta, your guest has occasion for repose. Shall we not leave him to his rest? Saying this, and taking Manfred by the hand, she took leave of Frederick and led the company forth. The prince, not sorry to quit a conversation which recalled to mind the discovery he had made of his most secret sensations, suffered himself to be conducted to his own apartment. After permitting Theodore, though under engagement to return to the castle on the morrow, a condition the young man gladly accepted, to retire with his father to the convent. Matilda and Isabella were too much occupied with their own reflections, and too little content with each other, to wish for further converse that night. They separated each to her chamber, with more expressions of ceremony and fewer of affection than had passed between them since their childhood. If they parted with small cordiality, they did but meet with greater impatience as soon as the sun was risen. Their minds were in a situation that excluded sleep, and each recollected 1,000 questions which she wished she had put to the other overnight. Matilda reflected that Isabella had been twice delivered by Theodore in very critical situations, which she could not believe accidental, His eyes, it was true, had been fixed on her in Frederick's chamber, but that might have been to disguise his passion for Isabella from the fathers of both. It were better to clear this up. She wished to know the truth, lest she should wrong her friend by entertaining a passion for Isabella's lover. Thus jealousy prompted, and at the same time borrowed, an excuse from friendship to justify its curiosity. Isabella, not less restless, had better foundation for her suspicions. Both Theodore's tongue and eyes had told her his heart was engaged. It was true, yet, perhaps, Matilda might not correspond to his passion. She had ever appeared insensible to love. All her thoughts were set on heaven. "Why did I dissuade her?" said Isabella to herself. "Am I punished for my generosity? But when did they meet? Where? It cannot be. I have deceived myself. Perhaps last night was the first time they ever beheld each other. It must be some other object that has prepossessed his affections. If it is, I am not so unhappy as I thought. If it is not my friend Matilda, how can I stoop to wish for the affection of a man who rudely and unnecessarily acquainted me with his indifference, and that at the very moment in which common courtesy demanded at least expressions of civility? I will go to my dear Matilda, who will confirm me in this becoming pride. Man is false. I will advise with her on taking the veil. She will rejoice to find me in this disposition, and I will acquaint her that I no longer oppose her inclination for the cloister." In this frame of mind, and determined to open her heart entirely to Matilda, she went to that princess's chamber, whom she found already dressed and leaning pensively on her arm. I got nervous and had to look at stuff real quick. I haven't checked up on anything to make sure we're good in a minute. Okay. ADD brain. It just, go check something real quick. Okay, yeah. I don't even remember what sentence I was on. Okay, hold on. Give me some water. In this frame of mind, and determined to open her heart entirely to Matilda, she went to that princess's chamber, whom she found already dressed and leaning pensively on her arm. This attitude, so correspondent to what she felt herself, revived Isabella's suspicions and destroyed the confidence she had proposed to place in her friend. They blushed at meeting and were too much novices to disguise their sensations with address. After some unmeaning questions and replies, Matilda demanded of Isabella the cause of her flight. The latter, who had almost forgotten Manfred's passion, so entirely was she occupied by her own, concluding that Matilda referred to her last escape from the convent, which had occasioned the events of the preceding evening, replied, "Martelli brought word to the convent that your mother was dead." "Oh," said Matilda, interrupting her. "Bianca has explained that mistake to me. On seeing me faint, she cried out, 'The princess is dead!' And Martelli, who had come for the usual dole to the castle—" "And what made you faint?" said Isabella, indifferent to the rest. Matilda blushed and stammered. "My father. He was sitting in judgment on a criminal." "What criminal?" said Isabella eagerly. "A young man," said Matilda. I think it was that young man that—" "What, Theodore?" said Isabella. "Yes," answered she. "I never saw him before. I do not know how he had offended my father, but as he has been of service to you, I am glad my lord has pardoned him." "Served me?" replied Isabella. "Do you term it serving me? To wound my father and almost occasion his death? Though it is but since yesterday that I am blessed with knowing a parent. I hope Matilda does not think I am such a stranger to filial tenderness as not to resent the boldness of that audacious youth, and that it is impossible for me to ever feel any affection for one who dared to lift his arm against the author of my being. No, Matilda, my heart abhors him, and if you still retain the friendship for me that you have vowed from your infancy, you will detest a man who has been on the point of making me miserable forever." Matilda had held down her head and replied, "I hope my dearest Isabella does not doubt her Matilda's friendship. I never beheld that youth until yesterday. He is almost a stranger to me. But as the surgeons have pronounced your father out of danger, You ought not to harbor uncharitable resentment against one who I am persuaded did not know the Marquis was related to you." "You plead his cause very pathetically," said Isabella, "considering he is so much a stranger to you. I am mistaken, or he returns your charity." "What mean you?" said Matilda. "Nothing," said Isabella, repenting that she had given Matilda a hint of Theodore's inclination for her. Then, changing the discourse, she asked Matilda what occasioned Manfred to take Theodore for a spectre. "Bless me," said Matilda, "did not you observe his extreme resemblance to the portrait of Alfonso in the gallery? I took notice of it to Bianca even before I saw him in armor, but with the helmet on, he is the very image of that picture." "I do not much observe pictures," said Isabella. "Much less have I examined this young man so attentively as you seem to have done. Ah, Matilda, your heart is in danger, but let me warn you as a friend. He has owned to me that he is in love. It cannot be with you, for yesterday was the first time you ever met, was it not?" Ow. "Certainly," replied Matilda, "but why does my dearest Isabella conclude from anything I have said that—" She paused, then continuing, "He saw you first, and I am far from having the vanity to think that my little portion of charms can engage a heart devoted to you. May you be happy, Isabella, whatever is the fate of Matilda." "My lovely friend," said Isabella, whose heart was too honest to resist a kind expression, It is you that Theodore admires. I saw it. I am persuaded of it. Nor shall a thought of my own happiness suffer me to interfere with yours." This frankness drew tears from the gentle Matilda, and jealousy that for a moment had raised a coolness between these amiable maidens soon gave way to the natural sincerity and candor of their souls. Each confessed to the other the impression that Theodore had made on her, and this confidence was followed by a struggle of generosity, each insisting on yielding her claim to her friend. At length, the dignity of Isabella's virtue reminding her of the preference which Theodore had almost declared for her rival, made her determined to conquer her passion and cede the beloved object to her friend. During this contest of amity, Hippolyta entered her daughter's chamber. "Madam," said she to Isabella, "you have much tenderness for Matilda, and interest yourself so kindly in whatever affects a wretched house, that I can have no secrets with my child which are not proper for you to hear." The princesses were all attention and anxiety. "Know then, madam," continued Hippolyta, "and you, my dearest Matilda, that being convinced by all the events of these 2 last ominous days, that heaven purposes the scepter of Otranto should pass from Manfred's hands into those of the Marquis Frederick, I have been perhaps inspired with the thought of averting our total destruction by the union of our rival houses. With this view, I have been proposing to Manfred, my lord, to tender this dear child to Frederick, your father." "Me to Lord Frederick!" cried Matilda. "Good heavens, my gracious mother, and have you named it to my father?" "I have," said Hippolyta. "He listened benignly to my proposal, and is gone to break it to the Marquis." "Ah, wretched princess!" cried Isabella. "What hast thou done? What ruin has thy inadvertent goodness been preparing for thyself, for me, and for Matilda?" "Ruin from me to you and to my child," said Hippolyta. "What can this mean?" "Alas," said Isabella, "the purity of your own heart prevents your seeing the depravity of others. Manfred, your lord, that impious man?" "Hold," said Hippolyta, "you must not, in my presence, young lady, mention Manfred with disrespect. He is my lord and husband, and—" "Will not long be so," said Isabella, "if his wicked purposes can be carried into execution." "This language amazes me," said Hippolyta. "Your feeling, Isabella—" His cat's about to run in here, screaming, when she opens the door. Maybe not. Your language amazes me, said Hippolyta. Your feeling, Isabella, is warm, but until this hour I never knew it betray you into intemperance. What deed of Manfred authorizes you to treat him as a murderer, an assassin? Thou virtuous and too credulous princess, replied Isabella. It is not thy life he aims at. It is to separate himself from thee, to divorce thee, to divorce me, to divorce my mother, cried Hippolyta and Matilda at once. Yes, said Isabella, and to complete his crime he meditates. I cannot speak it. What can surpass what thou hast already uttered, said Matilda. Hippolyta was silent. Grief choked her speech, and the recollection of Manfred's late ambiguous and the recollection of Manfred's late ambiguous discourses confirmed what she heard. Excellent, dear lady, madam, mother, cried Isabella, flinging herself at Hippolyta's feet in a transport of passion. Trust me, believe me, I will die 1,000 deaths sooner than consent to injure you, than yield to so odious. Oh, this is too much, cried Hippolyta. What crimes does one crime suggest? Rise, dear Isabella, do not doubt your virtue. Oh, Matilda, the stroke is too heavy for thee. Weep not, my child, and not a murmur, I charge thee. Remember, he is thy father still. But you are my mother too, said Matilda fervently, and you are virtuous. You are guiltless. Oh, must not I complain? You will not, said Hippolyta. Come, all will yet be well. Manfred, in the agony for the loss of thy brother, knew not what he said. Perhaps Isabella misunderstood him. His heart is good, and, my child, thou knowest not all. There is a destiny hangs over us. The hand of Providence is stretched out. Oh, could I but save thee from the wreck. Yes, continued she in a firmer tone, perhaps the sacrifice of myself may atone for all. I will go and offer myself to this divorce. It boosts not what becomes of me. I will withdraw into the neighboring monastery and waste the remainder of life in prayers and tears for my child and the prince. Thou art as much too good for this world, said Isabella, as Manfred is execrable. But think not, lady, that thy weakness shall determine for me. I swear, hear me all ye angels. Stop, I adjure thee, cried Hippolyta. Remember thou dost not depend on thyself. Thou hast a father. My father is too pious, too noble, interrupted Isabella, to command an impious deed. But should he command it, can a father enjoin a cursed act? I was contracted to the son, can I wed the father? No, madam, no. Force should not drag me to Manfred's hated bed. I loathe him, I abhor him. Divine and human laws forbid. And my friend, my dearest Matilda, would I wound her tender soul by injuring her adored mother, my own mother? I never have known another. Oh, she is the mother of both, cried Matilda. Can we, Isabella, adore her too much? My lovely children, said the touched Hippolyta, your tenderness overpowers me, but I must not give way to it. It is not ours to make election of ourselves. Heaven, our fathers, and our husbands must decide for us. Have patience until you hear what Manfred and Frederick have determined. If the Marquis accepts Matilda's hand, I know she will readily obey. Heaven may interpose and prevent the rest. What means, my child, continued she, seeing Matilda fall at her feet with a flood of speechless tears. But no, answer me not, my daughter. I must not hear a word against the pleasure of thy father. Oh, doubt not my obedience, my dreadful obedience to him and to you, said Matilda. But can I, most respected of women, can I experience all this tenderness, this world of goodness, and conceal a thought from the best of mothers? What art thou going to utter? Said Isabella, recollect thyself. Matilda. No, Isabella, said the princess, I should not deserve this incomparable parent if the inmost recesses of my soul harbored a thought without her permission. Nay, I have offended her. I have suffered a passion to enter my heart without her avowal, and here I disclaim it. Here I vow to heaven and her. My child, said Hippolyta. There's my child doing something bad. Sorry, there's a cat. Cat doing cat things. What was I doing? I was counting down the minutes until this chapter was done. My child, said Hippolyta. What words are these? What new calamities has fate in store for us? Thou, a passion? Thou, in this hour of destruction? Oh, I see all my guilt, said Matilda. I abhor myself if I cost my mother a pang. She is the dearest thing I have on earth. Oh, I will never behold him more. Isabella, said Hippolyta, thou art conscious to this unhappy secret, whatever it is. Speak. What? Cried Matilda. Have I so forfeited my mother's love that she will not permit me even to speak my own guilt? Oh, wretched Matilda. Thou art too cruel, said Isabella to Hippolyta. Canst thou behold this anguish of a virtuous mind, and not commiserate it? Not pity my child, said Hippolyta, catching Matilda in her arms. Oh, I know she is good. She is all virtue, all tenderness and duty. I do forgive thee, my excellent, my only hope. The princesses then revealed to Hippolyta their mutual inclination for Theodore, and the purpose of Isabella to resign him to Matilda. Hippolyta blamed their imprudence and showed them the improbability that either father would consent to bestow his heiress on so poor a man, though nobly born. Some comfort it gave her to find their passion of so recent a date, and that Theodore had had but little cause to suspect it in either. She strictly enjoined them to avoid all correspondence with him. This Matilda fervently promised, but Isabella, who flattered herself that she meant no more than to promote his union with her friend, could not determine to avoid him, and made no reply. I will go to the convent, said Hippolyta, and order new masses to be said for a deliverance from these calamities. Oh, my mother, said Matilda, you mean to quit us. You mean to take sanctuary, and to give my father an opportunity of pursuing his fatal intention. Alas, on my knees I supplicate you to forbear. Will you leave me a prey to Frederick? I will follow you to the convent. Be at peace, my child, said Hippolyta. I will return instantly. I will never abandon thee until I know it is the will of heaven and for thy benefit. Do not deceive me, said Matilda. I will not marry Frederick until thou commandest it. Alas, what will become of me? Why that exclamation, said Hippolyta. I have promised thee to return. Ah, my mother, replied Matilda, stay and save me from myself. A frown from thee can do more than all my father's severity. I have given away my heart, and you alone can make me recall it. No more, said Hippolyta. Thou must not relapse, Matilda. I can quit Theodore, said she, but must I wed another? Let me attend thee to the altar, and shut myself from the world forever. Thy fate depends on thy father, said Hippolyta. I have ill bestowed my tenderness. If it has taught thee to revere aught beyond him, adieu, my child. I go to pray for thee. Hippolyta's real purpose was to demand of Jerome whether in conscience she might not consent to the divorce. She had oft urged Manfred to resign the principality, which the delicacy of her conscience rendered an hourly burthen to her. These scruples concurred to make the separation from her husband appear less dreadful to her than it would have seemed in any other situation. Jerome, at quitting the castle overnight, had questioned Theodore severely why he had accused him to Manfred of being privy to his escape. Theodore owned it had been with design to prevent Manfred's suspicion from alighting on Matilda, and added, the holiness of Jerome's life and character secured him from the tyrant's wrath. Jerome was heartily grieved to discover his son's inclination for that princess, and leaving him to his rest, promised in the morning to acquaint him with important reasons for conquering his passion. Theodore, like Isabella, was too recently acquainted with parental authority to submit to its decisions against the impulse of his heart. He had little curiosity to learn the friar's reasons, and less disposition to obey them. The lovely Matilda had made stronger impressions on him than filial affection. All night he pleased himself with visions of love, and it was not till late after the morning office that he recollected the friar's commands to attend him at Alfonso's tomb. "Young man," said Jerome, when he saw him, "this tardiness does not please me. Have a father's commands already so little weight?" Theodore made awkward excuses and attributed his delay to having overslept himself. "And on whom were thy dreams employed?" said the friar sternly. His son blushed. "Come, come," resumed the friar, "inconsiderate youth, this must not be. Eradicate this guilty passion from thy breast." "Guilty passion!" cried Theodore. "Can guilt dwell with innocent beauty and virtuous modesty?" "It is sinful," replied the friar, "to cherish those whom heaven has doomed to destruction. A tyrant's race must be swept from the earth to the 3rd and 4th generation." "Will heaven visit the innocent for the crimes of the guilty?" said Theodore. "The fair Matilda has virtues enough." "To undo thee," interrupted Jerome. Hast thou so soon forgotten that twice the savage Manfred has pronounced thy sentence?" "Nor have I forgotten, sir," said Theodore, "that the charity of his daughter delivered me from his power. I can forget injuries, but never benefits." "The injuries thou hast received from Manfred's race," said the friar, "are beyond what thou canst conceive. Reply not, but view this holy image. Beneath this marble monument rest the ashes of the good Alfonso, a prince adorned with every virtue, the father of his people, the delight of mankind. Kneel, headstrong boy, and list, while a father unfolds a tale of horror that will expel every sentiment from thy soul but sensations of sacred vengeance. Alfonso, much injured prince, let thy unsatisfied shade sit awful on the troubled air, while these trembling lips, ha, who comes here?" "The most wretched of women," said Hippolyta, entering the choir. "Good father, art thou at leisure? But why this kneeling youth? What means the horror imprinted on each countenance? Why at this venerable tomb? Alas, hast thou seen aught? We were pouring forth our orisons to heaven." Orisons? Orison, a prayer. Okay, we were praying to heaven, replied the friar with some confusion, "to put an end to the woes of this deplorable province. Join with us, lady. Thy spotless soul may obtain an exemption from the judgments which the portents of these days but too speakingly denounce against thy house." "I pray fervently to heaven to divert them," said the pious princess. "Thou knowest it has been the occupation of my life to wrest a blessing for my lord and my harmless children. One, alas, is taken from me. Would heaven but hear me for my poor Matilda. Father, intercede for her." "Every heart will bless her," cried Theodore. With rapture. Be dumb, rash youth," said Jerome. "And thou, fond princess, contend not with the powers above. The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Bless his holy name, and submit to his decrees." "I do most devoutly," said Hippolyta, "but will he not spare my only comfort? Must Matilda perish too? Ah, father, I came, but dismiss thy son. No ear but thine must hear what I have to utter." "May heaven grant thy every wish, most excellent princess," said Theodore, retiring. Jerome frowned. Hippolyta then acquainted the friar with the proposal she had suggested to Manfred, his approbation of it, and the tender of Matilda that he was gone to make to Frederick. Jerome could not conceal his dislike of the notion, which he covered under pretense of the improbability that Frederick, the nearest of blood to Alfonso, and who was come to claim his succession, would yield to an alliance with the usurper of his right. but nothing could equal the perplexity of the friar when Hippolyta confessed her readiness not to oppose the separation and demanded his opinion on the legality of her acquiescence. What are you doing? What are you doing? Terrors are you committing? What terrors are you committing on the world and my apartment? Oh my goodness. Acquiescence, and demanded his opinion on the legality of her acquiescence. The friar caught eagerly at her request of his advice, and without explaining his aversion to the proposed marriage of Manfred and Isabella, he painted to Hippolyta in the most alarming colors the sinfulness of her consent, denounced judgments against her if she complied, and enjoined her in the severest terms to treat any such proposition with every mark of indignation and refusal. Manfred, in the meantime, had broken his purpose to Frederick and proposed the double marriage. That weak prince, who had been struck with the charms of Matilda, listened but too eagerly to the offer. He forgot his enmity to Manfred, whom he saw but little hope of dispossessing by force, and flattering himself that no issue might succeed from the union upon... I lost my place. I was trying to... I don't know if I said that right. Whatever. Whom he saw but little hope of dispossessing by force, and flattering himself that no issue might succeed from the union of his daughter with the tyrant. He looked upon his own succession to the principality as facilitated by wedding Matilda. He made faint opposition to the proposal, affecting, for form only, not to acquiesce until Hippolyta should consent to the divorce. Manfred took that upon himself. Transported with his success, and impatient to see himself in a situation to expect sons, he hastened to his wife's apartment, determined to extort her compliance. He learned with indignation that she was absent at the convent. His guilt suggested to him that she had probably been informed by Isabella of his purpose. He doubted whether her retirement to the convent did not import an intention of remaining there until she could raise obstacles to their divorce, and the suspicions he had already entertained of Jerome made him apprehend that the friar would not only traverse his views, but might have inspired Hippolyta with the resolution of taking sanctuary. Impatient to unravel this clue and to defeat its success, Manfred hastened to the convent and arrived there as the friar was earnestly exhorting the princess never to yield to the divorce. "Madam," said Manfred, "what business drew you hither? And why did you not await my return from the marquis?" "I came to implore a blessing on your counsels," replied Hippolyta. "My counsels do not need a friar's intervention," said Manfred. "And of all men living, is that hoary traitor the only one whom you delight to confer with?" "Profane prince," said Jerome, "is it at the altar that thou choosest to insult the servants of the altar? But Manfred, thy impious schemes are known." Impious. "Heaven and this virtuous lady know them. Nay, frown not, prince. The church despises thy menaces. Her thunders will be heard above thy wrath. Dare to proceed in thy cursed purpose of a divorce until her sentence be known, and here I lance her anathema at thy head." "Audacious rebel," said Manfred, endeavoring to conceal the awe with which the friar's words inspired him. "Dost thou presume to threaten thy lawful prince?" "Thou art no lawful prince," said Jerome. "Thou art no prince. Go, discuss thy claim with Frederick, and when that is done—" "It is done," replied Manfred. "Frederick accepts Matilda's hand, and is content to waive his claim unless I have no male issue." As he spoke those words, 3 drops of blood fell from the nose of Alfonso's statue. Manfred turned pale, and the princess sank on her knees. "Behold," said the friar, Mark this miraculous indication that the blood of Alfonso will never mix with that of Manfred. My gracious lord, said Hippolyta, let us submit ourselves to heaven. Think not thy ever obedient wife rebels against thy authority. I have no will but that of my lord and the church. To that reverend tribunal let us appeal. It does not depend on us to burst the bonds that unite us. If the church shall approve the dissolution of our marriage, be it so. I have but few years, and those of sorrow to pass. Where can they be worn away so well as at the foot of this altar, in prayers for thine and Matilda's safety? But thou shalt not remain here until then, said Manfred. Repair with me to the castle, and there I will advise on the proper measures for a divorce. But this meddling friar comes not thither. My hospitable roof shall never more harbor a traitor, and for thy reverence's offspring, continued he, I banish him from my dominions. He, I ween, is no sacred personage, nor under the protection of the church. Whoever weds Isabella, it shall not be Father Falconara's started-up son. They start up, said the friar, who are suddenly beheld in the seat of lawful princes, but they wither away like the grass, and their place knows them no more. Manfred, casting a look of scorn at the friar, I've stopped my child. Stop that. Manfred, casting a look of scorn at the friar, led Hippolyta forth, but at the door of the church whispered one of his attendants to remain concealed about the convent, and bring him instant notice, if any of the castle should repair thither. End of that part. We're at the last one, chapter 5. Probably not going to read anymore tonight. Oh, all the fancy words get to me after a while. Oh, no, I dropped my thing. All right, well... Hey, hello viewer. Thank you for hanging out with me in my book club. My Vampires Are My Special Interest book club, where we are currently not talking about vampires, but we do talk about them on Sundays. Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for about 2 hours. We read short stories. Not for the last couple of weeks. I'm kind of... I'm kind of inconsistent when I'm in between books, but I do want to get back into it. If you're here for the vampires, you should go there for the vampires and stay here for the gothic. I'm saying nonsense because I'm tired. Thank you for being here, especially if you made it all the way to the end of this random freaking video. Very cool. Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll finish this book next time. Whenever that next time may be, when I'm in a gothic mood. And, yeah, I'll see you around. Thanks for being here, and good night. Waving until I see myself waving.